Have you ever had it where you're walking on a lonely beach? Or you're up early and the sun has just come over the horizon? You know how these times feel different? Different than ordinary places or moments. They're significant or magical or spiritual. If you've noticed this, you've experienced a thing that has been called since way back, thin places. And I'm impressed. Westerners aren't very in tune with this kind of thing. And I think we Western Christians might benefit from the idea of thin places. So what are thin places? Thin places are often associated with Celtic Christianity. They are places where the boundary between the spiritual and earthly realms is believed to be especially thin or permeable. In these places, it is thought that we experience a heightened sense of the divine. A feeling of close connection to the spiritual or the transcendent. The term thin places doesn't have a specific origin in historical Celtic texts or doctrines, but it emerged as a descriptive term to articulate a Celtic Christian perspective on spirituality and the sacredness of certain locations. The idea was deeply rooted in Celtic spirituality, and it has been transmitted through the ages to anyone who is a native English speaker. So what are these thin places? In Celtic Christianity, they are often found at the margins. Not just geographical margins either, but temporal ones as well. Geographical margins are locations where different elements meet, such as seashores and riverbanks and marshes. These are considered thin places because they symbolize the meeting of different realms, land and water, solid ground and fluidity. There are also temporal margins, times of day like the sunrise and sunset, where day transitions into night and vice versa. These are thin moments. Times when the ordinary seems to pause and the spiritual realm feels more accessible. And threshold spaces are also thin places. Doorways or gateways or any kind of a threshold. They symbolize the crossing from one state or realm to another. These marginal spaces, whether in place or time, are viewed as liminal, where the veil between the material and spiritual world is particularly thin, allowing for deeper spiritual experiences. In the Western Church, this talk about thin places may seem a little much. The next thing you know, Dry Bones will be telling us to believe in fairies. Maybe I'll do that one day. But let's not be distracted. I think there are some significant benefits to our faith life by being open to the idea of thin places in our world. So let's consider some of these benefits. What might be the effects on our spiritual life if we sought out or recognized moments and locations where we feel particularly close to the divine? Here's a list of reasons, but I want to zone in on a few because they are the places where we really need to think about this. The first one, we really do need to be more spiritually aware in the West. We are fairly blind to the presence and the movement of the spiritual in our everyday life. Gods and spirits, both benevolent and malevolent, are real, but we aren't very good at seeing them or taking them very seriously. We think that the spiritual realm is either way off somewhere or it's inside our heart. Orthodox Christianity would tell us differently, that the world is filled with the spiritual, and we could use some reminders that this is so. Thin places might help with that. And a related benefit of attending to thin places, by doing so, it will help us to bridge the sacred-secular divide we've constructed in our minds. I've made videos about this before, where we split our life into categories of ordinary life and spiritual life. And then we really don't see how God relates meaningfully in our ordinary life. Thin places blur the line between the physical and the spiritual realms, between ordinary life and spiritual life. And it helps us to integrate faith more fully into daily experiences and cultivate a sense of wonder and awe in the world around us. We don't have enough awe. And jumping down to the last one, I think that it's really good for us to reconnect with other Christian traditions. We've lost a lot of things over the centuries that would be able to help us to have a more holistic faith and spirituality. By reconnecting with this ancient spiritual practice, we may be able to pick up some of the wisdom that Celtic Christians had that might challenge some of our own ways which might be more modern than they are Christian. I think the main benefit of being aware of thin places and embracing that feeling when we are in them is that they help us to become more profoundly aware of the presence of God everywhere. Thank you, and we'll see you next time.